What's up, guys? Max here, back with a brand new episode of the Scuttlebutt Show. I hope you're all doing great out there. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, I am super excited to bring on a very special guest that we have. You know, a couple weeks ago, we had Ben Milligan on the show to talk about his book, By Water Beneath the Walls. And afterwards, I had a wonderful conversation with our guest today, who has tons of great things to talk about and share with us. And I'm really excited to announce him on the show today. Please give a warm welcome to our guest, Duncan Smith. Duncan, how are you doing?
Max, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on your show today.
Absolutely. It's really my pleasure and a pleasure for our audience here who is joining us live. And I'll be monitoring the chat. So if anyone wants to jump in with a question or a comment while the show is going, please do so. We would love to hear from you. Duncan, for anybody who doesn't know, I've been talking about you a little bit and you know, warming up the audience for today's episode, but I know we have a lot of people joining us today from LinkedIn and other places. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
My background, 32 years as a SEAL, 5 of that active duty, went to the reserves to attend graduate school, but spent 10 years very involved as a reservist, would deploy each year overseas. And then 9/11 happened. I came back on active duty, did another 17 years. So of my 32 years, no combat deployments until after 9/11. And at that point in time, 5 combat deployments, retired just about 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago now. I'm a husband, a father. My wife, like yours, we have a little bit in common. Both our wives work in the healthcare arena. And I've got 3 kids. I'm a Navy dad times 3, and also a grandfather. So that's just a little bit of background. I'm also currently proud to say, the executive director of the SEAL Family Foundation, a charity dedicated to supporting the families of SEALs and the Gold Star families, those families that have lost someone from Naval Special Warfare.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so one of the big things I want everyone to know about today is we are going to spend some time talking about the SEAL Family Foundation. Can you, really quick, while we have everyone here at the beginning of the episode, and we'll bring it up a couple times during, but can you tell us just a little bit about your role with the SEAL Family Foundation before we get into, you know, your very illustrious career, by the way? Many, you know, any one of your many achievements would probably define a career for most people, but you have probably about 10 of those that we can go through. Can you please just tell us a little about the SEAL Family Foundation, your role, and how people can go check that out if they wish to?
I'd be happy to. The SEAL Family Foundation, my role within the foundation has evolved. Initially, it was someone who benefited from the kind of support that they offer. And now I have the opportunity, along with an amazing group of teammates, to include a Gold Star spouse, a Navy spouse whose husband worked in Naval Special Warfare, and other stalwarts, and an amazing board across the country. We work and are focused on really helping make the Naval Special Warfare families resilient. And I can define that in more detail, but the bottom line is the SEAL teams and the Special Warfare combatant craft crewman community, what we call boat guys and team guys in the case of SEALs, really are of their greatest value to the Navy, to the Special Operations community, and to the nation when they hit the 6, 8, 10, 12-year mark. That's when people start pinning on, you know, E6, chief, senior chief, or lieutenant commander. They're not so much in the learning and getting mentored mode. They're now in the leading and delivering and fighting on behalf of the nation, bringing, you know, a decade or more of skills to bear on the battlefield. But guess what? You can't do that as people grow and move through their lives, because what really entices someone to want to become a SEAL when they're a 22-year-old recent college graduate or an 18 or 19-year-old, they are all about becoming a team guy, a boat guy, serving the nation, becoming as competent as they can as a warfighter. But guess what? You're going to meet someone possibly when you're 26, 27, 28 years old, and you may decide that you want to get married and have a family. So today, the average SEAL, and this is somewhat dated, and I can't speak for the active duty community, but a few years ago, the average SEAL was 32 years old. He had 2 kids. He had a mortgage, a wife, and he also had his bachelor's degree. So what that says is, if you want to retain that 32-year-old who might have been serving in the teams for a decade, you've got to keep his family intact. You've got to support his family. And so that's what the SEAL Family Foundation is all about. And there's a whole range of things that we do that really go from the very beginning of creating a family in a couple ways, creating an extended family, and then helping create an actual family. and it runs all the way out to bereavement. We've said goodbye to some very noble SEALs. Just recently, I was very honored to be asked to be a pallbearer as we said goodbye to one of our first flag officers who was a Vietnam era SEAL. And SEAL Family Foundation was there to support that event and to help that family through that moment of saying goodbye. On the opposite end of the spectrum, unfortunately, we had a trainee, a very dedicated athlete, former Yale football player who was a young enlisted SEAL candidate who died following Hell Week. And so in his instance, we were part of supporting and saying goodbye through that bereavement process. Those aren't the things that we look forward to, but it's the support that we want to provide. More importantly, on the family side, and this is when I talk about my own evolution, as I've known young people who have become SEALs, I've had the opportunity to attend a graduation dinner. Well, I'd never heard of a graduation dinner. I went through class 137 back in 1986, where when you said to someone, hey, I think I want to be a SEAL, they would tell you, well, I heard there's going to be a new SeaWorld opening, in this area. and you kind of shake your head and you have to explain it's not about protecting marine life. It's about actually, performing as a special operator. Today, people know what SEALs are, but the reality is at that point in time, when you graduated from BUD/S, you would have family, some who chose to make the trip at your graduation. Today, people recognize just what's involved in going through the training. And the training is as hard as it's ever been. And that's going back to World War II, Korea, Vietnam. The core of training, the testing of one's mettle remains the same. Parts of it have changed and become much more technical. But what the SEAL Family Foundation has done through a very generous donation, a targeted donation by a gentleman, I'll just say is Kevin, and we really appreciate what he has done. We provide certain events that bring people together and start their Navy family and start their greater family. Kevin pays for the Hell Week breakfast. Hell Week is grueling, and these trainees go through so much for their first several months of training. When they complete Hell Week, a week later, we bring them together for an event where they have a time to sit down, bring their spouse, fiance. They're in a moment of quiet celebration before they bond further and move forward into the additional phases of training. The night before graduation, we host a graduation dinner. So if you've got a son named Carl, and he's been telling you the whole time about his buddy Hunter and his other buddy Vic, who we went through some amazing waves. It was terrifying. It was totally at night, but it clicked for us and we figured it out. Well, you get to meet who Carl's buddies are, right? But more importantly, it's the start of an extended family. You now know who Carl's parents are, or Carl's wife or girlfriend, and Victor's wife and girlfriend. And you kind of start together in a social environment that continues to the graduation ceremony the next day. So if there's a deployment that happens where someone's injured or someone needs support, well, we've been a catalyst in establishing kind of a family network early on and getting people to know each other and support each other. So those are just some of the things we do. We also offer a number of programs that we support. Some we've incubated. There's a number out there for career transition that we were the initial funders of. So if you've heard of the Honor Foundation, that was funded, and all the funding initially came for the first several years from the SEAL Family Foundation. Same with the SEAL Future Foundation. We funded that initially and got them going. We're the primary funder for the Sisterhood. There's a program called SEAL Kids, which is an amazing program. I'm meeting with their director later this week, who's a PhD that really puts a lot of research and science and caring into the care of SEAL kids, both those who are the offspring of people serving, and also they work with those who are Gold Star family members. And we, in a way, in addition to the programs we fund on our own and create on our own, we also have been sort of a Silicon Valley incubator, a very targeted development of other 501c3 charities that help the SEAL community, the SWCC community, and all those enablers, including yourself, people who'd worked with Naval Special Warfare. We make sure they and their families are supported.
That's awesome. It's hard to express to to people listening how significant something like that is. Even after you described it very well, I still think people they can't quite get it. But I think one thing that it can maybe put into perspective is, we we've I remember when I was at the last command that I was with NSW, someone was killed downrange, and I know the SEAL Family Foundation provided a lot of support to the family. And when you talk about a community like the Naval Special Warfare community, it is small. It is extremely small. And then within that, all the people and their families all kind of spend all of their time together, because when everyone's at home, they're all hanging out together because they're friends as well as colleagues and teammates, and their spouses become friends and their kids become friends. And then when the service members leave, the families are left behind, but they don't just go, be by themselves. A lot of times they gather frequently, and, they support each other at home. And that military family network, that unit, is capable of incredible things. And I've seen them rally around people in need at some of the worst moments of someone's life, and provide critical support financially, emotionally, companionship, emotional support, just a phone number that somebody can call. And the SEAL Family Foundation dedicates themselves. And what's interesting is when I look on LinkedIn or on I think on Facebook as well, I always see the SEAL Family Foundation posting congratulations to the graduates of SQT class or boat class. We look forward to serving you and your families. And it's like right there from the immediate moment that somebody joins that community, the SEAL Family Foundation offers that support, and it means a lot. And I appreciate you joining the team to continue to serve even after a 32-year career in the Navy. That's incredible.
Well, it's my pleasure, and really it's my extended family. It's an honor to go to these graduations, and I try to attend as many as I can, just because the pulse and the culture of the community is something I want to stay in touch with. And honestly, I'm honored to be around and be a part of helping to facilitate that support. I will tell you, we're not alone in this arena too. There's a whole network of 501c3s or nonprofit organizations that are out there supporting the Naval Special Warfare community. And we really mesh well together. We work in coordination. Some are now dedicated totally to a SEAL or SWCC member who's leaving active service, going out to the civilian business community or technology community or law enforcement community. And there's others that have very specific missions that differ from ours. And so we dovetail, I think, beautifully together, and we work closely. What we really try to do within our pillars of support, which are the active duty SEALs, the active duty SWCCs, their family members, and then the Gold Star family members, Gold Star spouses, and the children of the fallen. What we also tend to really try to focus on is working directly with the command. So Naval Special Warfare Command will identify what might be something that is largely supported by the Navy, largely supported by DoD or the Special Operations Community, SOCOM, through their pressure on the force and family support. But there are some gaps that we can help improve, and we can help bring them along. Some real, very new programs that we're trying to do, and also some programs that involve us looking back through history, back through time, to support those who've served in places like Afghanistan, and those who perhaps are trying to start their own family, but they don't know where to turn or how to take some of those steps that involve preparing them to do that in the future should something on the battlefield or medically go wrong. So we have a new program called Tadpole, which is a service available to NSW members should they choose to preserve their DNA to have a family in the future.
Oh, wow.
So that's pretty groundbreaking, and that's not currently offered by TRICARE Health Insurance or by the Navy, but we think it's a need, and we think it's a need that's been identified by our Gold Star spouse director of programs, Cindy Axelson, who lost her husband in the events portrayed in the film Lone Survivor. When you see a very well-known actor turn to Mark Luttrell, who is the sole survivor and lone survivor, and say, "Hey, goodbye to Cindy for me." Mark Wahlberg, as Marcus turns back and says, you'll be able to do that. And he's like, no, man, I don't think I will. Tell Cindy I love her. Well, that's Cindy who works with us. And she's been amazing through her 7 years, 6-7 years with the organization. And she really is an incredible litmus test for what makes sense. We described the Tadpole program to her, and she thought there was a real valid need there, particularly as she talks to the other Gold Star spouses that she's close to. So as you can see, it's kind of a mosaic of services we offer, but it's ones we're very proud of and ones that we stay very dedicated to, constantly researching what else needs to be done, where we can assist, but always through and with the support and direction of the active duty command.
Yeah. Now, you didn't end up in this role by accident. You have quite a story, and where does the story really begin for you? How do you end up in the Navy? How do you end up wanting to be a SEAL? Where does this whole journey that got you to where you are today start?
It's funny. I think for a lot of young people, young men and women, want a mission, right? Want purpose. You'd hear that talked about a lot about a decade ago, right? That green is the new good, or people want to, do things for others. When I was a young person in high school, I knew I wanted to do something, and that continuum probably ran between Marine Corps and Peace Corps. I actually wanted to be in the special operations community. I just didn't really know it, or I wanted to be a forest ranger. And so I looked hard at programs along both those two fronts. And in my mind, there was an amazing mentor and leader who lived down the street, and his name was Colonel Pilatus, and his kids went to high school with me. And at that time, he'd be gone for quite a while. Just like today's modern SEALs are gone 180 days on average a year before they deploy. Mm-hmm. He was deploying for Vietnam. So I finished high school in 1976. And when I was a freshman and a sophomore, Vietnam was kind of winding down, but Colonel Pilatus would be gone. And when he'd come home, I'd spend time with his sons all the time, and his daughter, but spent time with him, enjoyed talking to him. And he was the first person I think I met when I was 14 who really talked to me like an adult, looked me in the eye, very clear thinker, listened to what I said, processed it, and probably would follow on with a question or an insight or a suggestion. And he had told me about a program that at that time the Marine Corps ran at Camp Pendleton. You had to be 15, 16, or 17. I was 14, about to turn 14, I guess. And it was called Devil Pups. So he said it's 10 days. You run around down at Camp Pendleton and you learn how to march and jump off a 35-foot pool, off a tower into a pool, and do a million other things, very little sleep. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of interesting. So I was a Devil Pup. At that point in time, I thought the Marine Corps is, it is what life is about as a person who wants to serve in the military. And so I applied for and received a Marine Corps ROTC scholarship when I went to college, and was at the University of Southern California. And while I was there, I was a part of the Marine Corps unit and was on the drill team, which was kind of like the Marine Corps 8th NI. I was a 300 PFTer, which meant I maxed out the Marine Corps fitness test, which at that time was 20 pull-ups, 80 sit-ups under 2 minutes, and then you had to do a 3-mile run under 18 minutes. So I was doing those things and did it repeatedly. Felt that as I learned more, I wanted to be in the recon community. And so as a midshipman, whether you're at the Naval Academy or in an NROTC program at a civilian university, you go off on summer cruises. And the summer cruise I went on was a Mediterranean cruise aboard a helicopter carrier called the Iwo Jima. And as you know, a lot of the amphib Navy, the ships are named after famous maritime battles that involve the Marine Corps, and a lot of them were World War II amphibious campaigns. So while I was on the Iwo Jima, this was my, in theory, indoctrination to learn what it's like to be a young enlisted sailor. And then you do more Marine Corps things later on in your college career. So CrossFit wasn't a thing then, but I was in the hangar bay, that hangar deck below the flight deck, where I was doing a rope climb. So I'd do a rope climb, look at my watch, wait 45 seconds, try to do another rope climb, wait a minute, do another rope climb, wait a minute and a half. And was just kind of doing sort of high intensity repeats. And this guy with long hair came up and he said, "Hey, for a swabby, you're in pretty good shape." And I kind of braced up. I said, "Oh, thank you, sir. I'm not a swabby. I'm a Marine Option NROTC midshipman." He said, "Yeah, right. Listen, don't call me sir. And if you like to work out, me and my buddies are going to be down here tomorrow morning. Why don't you join us? That'd be great. What time is that?" "We'll be here starting at 5 a.m. Be here early." 5 a.m. "Yes, sir. I'll think about it." He goes, "Yeah, you do think about it. And don't call me sir." So I head down in the hangar bay the next morning at 5 a.m. And there's this circle of guys who have equally long hair, and they're fit like nobody else I'd seen on the ship. And we start doing this PT circle. Now, in my mind, I'm this guy who maxed out the Marine Corps screening test, and I thought I was in pretty good shape. And I get out, work out with these guys, and they're doing push-ups in sets of 50, and they're doing 6 push-ups through the course of a 90-minute workout. They're doing back flutter kicks, which I didn't know what that was at the time. And I tried to hang as best I could, but I wasn't keeping up with these guys. When the workout ended, no one came up and patted me on the back, and they kind of looked over their shoulder at this kid, and they all kind of went away. And the lieutenant said, "We're going to be doing this again tomorrow if you want to." I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Hey, don't call me sir." Now, I later learned he was a lieutenant, and I'm still in touch with him today. But I came back the next day, and he said, "You know what? You're the first one ever to come back twice," because midshipmen take their cruises in the summer. They've met many other midshipmen throughout the summer. So I worked out with the guys, and then I wound up, with so much lactic acid, I was pretty slow and moving around for a few days, but it was great. And I really enjoyed it. And I had a chance later to talk to him a little bit. And he explained, "Hey, we're a UDT platoon. We're SEAL team members. We went to something called BUDS." I said, "Excuse me, to what?" He said, "BUDS. It's basic underwater demolition and SEAL training." I said, "How do you do that?" He goes, "Well, I don't know. You got to talk to your folks at your college, but you're Marine Option?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, I don't know if it's possible." So I went back, sat down with an amazing leader that we had, 2 of them, a Marine Corps gunnery sergeant and a lieutenant colonel Marine who was the officer instructor for the NROTC unit there at USC. And back then, they were trying to grow the Navy. So we had, I think, about 220 midshipmen in that battalion. And I talked to the lieutenant colonel, and I said, "Hey, sir, this is who I met. This is what I want to do. I know last year we talked a little bit about force recon. Can you tell me more about it?" And he was very frank. And he said, "Hey, the SEAL organization is an interesting one. My guess is it's going to dwindle and shrink and perhaps disappear now that Vietnam is over. However, you may find, that there's a lasting career there. I will be honest with you about force recon." And this is dated, right? This is back in the late 1970s. At that point in time, he an accomplished infantry officer, said, "You'll do recon once. It'll be 2 years. So if you want to play the commando role, that's not career enhancing. And, if you get that shot, it'll be a one-time deal." So I thought about it, did more research, reached out through some friends, and found someone whose son was a SEAL, an officer, and basically got some good information. So I chose to leave on a leave of absence from ROTC, evaluate this whole career opportunity about being a SEAL, or do I go back and stay with the Marines and get commissioned there? And the short answer is I was pretty torn. Everyone says no one makes it through BUDS. And so I heard that a bunch. And so for me, I paid for school on my own. I was working in the dorms as what's called a resident advisor. Unbelievably good leadership training opportunity, believe it or not. Probably one of the best ones I've had in my life.
Wow. Okay.
And after being an RA, and at that time, no one had short hair, and we were the University of Southern California. So all the now kind of historic, cheesy TV shows were all being made in Southern California. So if you had short hair, you could work as an extra on a lot of these TV shows. So by doing that, I worked as an extra. Eventually I did some stunts, got my Screen Actors Guild card. And then through the course of that, paid my tuition as an RA, took care of my housing, and then graduated college. I've got some older sisters who were at pretty liberal schools at that time, Berkeley and Stanford and UC Santa Barbara, Santa Clara. And I said, "Yeah, I still think I want to do the Marine Corps, maybe the SEALs, but everyone says no one graduates." And they all looked at me and said, "Hey, we've known you all your life, much of our lives. And I'll tell you what, you just need adventure." Maybe they're right. So I thought about it. I applied for a work permit in New Zealand. At that time, there was a program among Commonwealth countries. You could work throughout the world in British Commonwealth nations like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK. So I chose New Zealand and went there, worked for a year there and in Australia on a sheep shearing gang, and then as a concrete carpenter in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales. Came back with a lot more money than I left with, and said, you know what? You've thought about this, but your degree's in finance. Throw on your necktie. Let's figure this out. You really ought to get serious and grow up. So at age 23, I went ahead, worked for what's now Morgan Stanley as a stockbroker. And man, it took about 18 months of that. And I'm like, okay, I've got to go do the SEAL team. I've got to at least give it a shot. So I applied for officer candidate school, which is a different commissioning source to come in the Navy, and went ahead, passed that to a standard that was acceptable at that point in time. Now it's a whole lot harder to get a slot to go to officer candidate school, but I was fortunate, picked one up, got commissioned back in Newport, Rhode Island. My dad, who was a World War II veteran, never deployed during World War II, but joined as a 17-year-old in the last few months of the war. And then he deployed during the Korean War as a surface warfare officer. He swore me in. So he made me an officer, which was cool. And then I went off to BUDS, class 137, graduated, and then SEAL Team 1, SEAL Team 5, and then the reserves for graduate school.
That's incredible. I wonder, do you ever wonder where your life would have been if that guy never approached you in the hangar bay?
Yeah, that's a good question to ponder. I reached out to him years later. Like, I didn't talk to him for probably 30 years. And 2 years before my retirement, I reached out to invite 3 people to my retirement, 3 specific ones. Colonel Pilatus, who I had found out at that time was deceased, unfortunately. He died a couple of years earlier. Also, this gentleman, John Timmerman, was his name, that lieutenant. And then there was also a gentleman, Frank, who was another SEAL, who had actually served in the Special Operations community in Australia. When their involvement in the Vietnam War ended, he emigrated to the U.S. to become a SEAL. He was one of the other guys that we're working out with. So I am in touch with those guys. That doesn't answer the question, what would I have done had he not come up and said hello? It's a great question. I think I probably would have either gone into the Marine Corps, or I'd have been some, at that time, unhappy 35-year-old still serving as a stockbroker, which I thought is a great career and it's perfect for the right person. Just wasn't well timed for me at that young age.
Yeah. It's, you never know. You never know where life's going to take you. It's such an interesting thing. So another question I have is, this is, what was the atmosphere like post-Vietnam, maybe about less than a decade after Vietnam ends? What was the mood like if you said you wanted to join the military? Was it generally, I know your sister said you needed an adventure, but was there any pushback because of the PR crisis that the military maybe was going through post-Vietnam? Did you have any issues with that from your friends and family?
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think people, there was a sense of, Vietnam conflict was protracted and costly, and a lot of people's lives changed, both the Vietnamese folks and Americans and other partner nations who fought there. And it left a scar on a lot of people's lives, right? So I think part of the pushback was out of concern and empathy, but there was a very negative feeling at that time attached to being in the military. Additionally, I think that when you mentioned you wanted to be in the military, there's one of my best friends in life is a stuntman, very successful stuntman who doubled Jean-Claude Van Damme for a lot of his fight movies. If you ever saw the movie Roadhouse, which is getting to be a vintage film, but he doubled Patrick Swayze. So, he does Patrick's fights, and then he dives on the motorcycle to peel the guy off. That guy out in front of my parents' home, we were good buddies. We did our first triathlon together, and he was really doing all the right things in the stunt arena. And I was doing the right things as a stockbroker. I was winning competitions, for certain sales quotas and things like that, but I wasn't digging it. And he knew that. And I said, hey, Randy, got to tell you, man, I just joined the Navy. And he went, what? Why would you do that? So it's super foreign to him and a guy who knew me well. He said, how much are you going to make in the Navy? I said, well, actually, It's about 1,500 a month. And I didn't think that was bad. This guy's in Hollywood as a Screen Actors Guild stuntman. He's like, I don't get that, dude. I don't know why you do that. On that note, though, for any of your folks who are watching, what stood out to me, my dad's deceased, but at the time I was pondering what I was going to do next, I shared with very, very, very few people that I was going in the military. And I shared with even fewer that I was attempting to enter the SEAL training pipeline or go to BUDS. And everyone offered opinion. They were all very quick to offer opinion. I mentioned my sisters, but other friends who, I quit my job when I got told, hey, yes, we got a slot for you in 3 months, that kind of thing. And it was an awkward conversation with just about everyone when I said, hey, I'm going to be taken off. Why? Well, I'm joining the Navy. Why? And then they would tell me their opinion, their point of view. The only person who didn't was my dad. And so when I said to him, hey, Dad, everyone's telling me what I ought to do. You haven't said a word. You're the one guy I know who served in the Navy. He goes, well, have you signed up? I said, I did. Yeah, yesterday. He said, okay. So now you've signed up. Yeah. And he told me, I think you'll never regret it. He said, wow. I just didn't want to influence you. It had to 100% be your decision. His circumstances were different from mine. Depression era kid, grew up without a dad. He joined the Navy as a 122-pound, 5'11" guy. And he said his first full meal of his life was in the Navy. And he loved the Navy. The Navy sent him to Vanderbilt to get an I can't even say it, let alone could I take a single basic electrical engineering course. They sent him to Vanderbilt to get a degree in electrical engineering. They commissioned him during the Korean War. And in the Korean War, he got the GI Bill, came back, got his master's in EE from Stanford. So to him, the Navy, brought him to my mom, built a family. It was everything to him. So anyway, he shared that with me only after I said, no, really, I want your opinion. So I'm very careful today when people ask me, hey, what do you think I should do? And I give some advice that, I could share with you if you want, but a lot of it centers around, don't ask too many people their opinion, gather information, make your decision, but I don't oversell it. It's got to be something that's driven, in here after a little bit of this. You got to think about it and know what you're getting into. Being angry at a girlfriend or having a boss who doesn't think you can hack it or wanting to show someone, what you're really all about. Those aren't good reasons that'll ever get you through Hell Week, probably.
Yeah. So, wow, that is pretty awesome. Sounds like your dad had a lot of wisdom to share there too with that perspective. So you join, you go to BUDS. Do you have any, and you make it, class 137? That was it, one and done? Started with that class, finished with that class?
Yeah, I did. I was a one and done. I didn't know that was a thing back then, but I guess it is now. I mean, there's a good number of people. I couldn't give you the exact stat, but I would bet it's at least half who have rolled back once or twice. But I started, I think there were 110 and 137, 17 of us originals graduated together. And at that point in time, you would graduate from BUDS, and then you'd go to your SEAL team and you'd have a probationary period for up to a year. The earliest you could earn a trident would be 6 months after graduating from BUDS. So I went over to SEAL Team 1 from there. In Hell Week, I was not an exemplary athlete compared to some of these guys, college water polo players. We had a guy who had done the Ironman 3 times. This is back in the early 80s, and the Ironman was started in 1978. So it didn't really become a large event till later on. And our leading petty officer, LPO, had done 3 Ironmen. He was also one of the first guys to quit. So You develop kind of an understanding of a secret sauce that exists in terms of learning how to learning to be comfortable with discomfort, learning to identify your own weakness, recognize, hey man, I'm drifting, I'm hallucinating. If I start to really, if I fall out of the boat or I fall to the floor of the boat, just be ready, help me out here. And then you're ready to watch your buddy who, dude, are you okay? You're kind of drifting right now. Let's get back on it, or, swap roles or go to the difficult spot in the boat while your buddies have weaker moments. You learn self-awareness, you learn how to be a member of a team. And that's something that impacts your life, not just in the SEAL teams, but obviously beyond.
So you go through. Rumor has it that that was the last hard class too. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's not a rumor. I'm just waiting for it to be officially certified. But I think it's pretty understood that 137 was the hardest class. I say that, and now there have been some classes where no one finished. Very recently, some classes had very few finishers. So lots of things have changed, but the core of that training remains the same. It's a mentorship piece. The person that's training you will quite often be someone you deploy later with in combat. There's a sense of mutual respect often built. But that Hell Week component of staying awake for a week in a simulated combat environment, that hasn't gone away. And there was pressure a number of years ago, particularly while we were fighting a desert war and a high altitude mountain war, that really addressed, there's a thing called the Quadrennial Defense Review, which now is more of a national military strategy overlook. But back in the day, the QDR was the responsibility of the various branches of the military to look hard at how they perform, what their role is in America's defense. And you kind of called yourself out. The Navy would, the Air Force would, the Army would, the Marine Corps, and everyone would come back with these reports that were generated that would then be blessed by the Secretary of Defense, and then the President would give it the blessing and say, make it so. And in the case of Special Operations Forces back in around 2005, 2006, the QDR said, hey, Iraq, Afghanistan are driven by several different organizations in a perhaps disproportionate way, and SOF is one of those components. There are what we call the SOF truths. Special Operations Forces is SOF. And also, too, got to tell you, I was just a quick departure. I loved your interview with Ben Milligan, and I've since bought By Water Beneath the Walls. It was a great interview, and I was curious to see how many acronyms he used that didn't get explained, and there were very few. Mm-hmm. So he set the bar up here. So if I fall into SEAL speak or acronym speak, please stop me and ask me to clarify.
Sure.
That QDR, Quadrennial Defense Review, said that with Special Operations Forces, we in the SEAL teams, along with our partner forces in, the Army Rangers, the Green Berets, the MARSOC Marines, all these different communities, the Air Force PJs, had to grow by 15%. So at that time, there were approximately 1,700 enlisted SEALs and probably about 400 SEAL officers, but heavily tapped, heavily used, constant deployments. And so with the notion that we'd grow by 15%, that was translated into a growth of about 500 new SEALs. And so new enlisted SEALs. So year one of that growth, I was placed in charge of really kind of a human capital enterprise to identify the traits, find talented candidates, and try to improve who we had coming into the pipeline and their success of getting through without degrading training in any way. And so the first year, I think 2006 was probably the first year of that effort. And we said, okay, got some good news. 136 people graduated from SEAL training. Outstanding. But guess what? Following the semicolon comes, hey, we lost a number in combat. We had many retire. We had some who chose to do their 6-year obligation and get out. And so we lost 135 SEALs when we grew 136 new ones. Net, year one of a presidential mandate to grow 500 new SEALs, we were up 1 SEAL. So we had to kind of redouble our efforts, really think hard about who we are, where we come from, what are the success traits. And we did a very thorough internal look. And through the course of that look, we learned some pretty interesting things, some of which I think applies beautifully today when employers are having a hard time finding candidates for their particular industries, right? I mean, everything from Uber to the tech world to law enforcement, there's a real shortage of workers that's impacting people's lives with shortened hours and other things. And what we learned at that time in identifying talent is there's certain traits that you have to look for that really become a part of character. There's things you can train to, and those things that you can train to, which include some combat skills, those you can teach someone, but the character part, you can't. And what we did was we looked hard internally at what makes a successful SEAL, and where in that pipeline, that 1 year continuum that starts with first phase buds, second phase buds. Second phase is all Hell Week finishers. That's the dive phase of training. Third phase of buds, which is the land warfare training. That's where we now have the core of solid people. Their metal's been tested. They're stepping out there as a team member. They're ready to go. That's when we invest in technology and weapons training and demolition and so forth. And then from there, they move into what's called SEAL qualification training, or SQT. So when someone is a newly minted SEAL, we talk about going to their SQT graduation. So we looked at the folks about 6 weeks in who are Hell Week graduates, and we call them high potential candidates, because when someone makes it through Hell Week, they have on average about a 94 to 96% likelihood of coming all the way out the other end of the pipeline as a SEAL and going and serving in the SEAL teams. So we looked at what those traits are of that young person. Everything from at what age did you decide you wanted to do work like this, to what do your family members do? What sports did you play? Were you a Boy Scout? If so, were you an Eagle Scout? And a range of other things. Do you find history interesting? And then there's also some psychological tests that try to identify resilience. And it was kind of funny. We looked at all kinds of geography as well. And a couple of the core things that came away, some which were pretty surprising. The sports that are most often represented by SEALs, if you ask the average SEAL, what sports did you play? There's a large number that played football, basketball, baseball, but those three sports have about the lowest prediction of success. So, granted, vast numbers of American athletes play those sports, but when you start looking at how to build a highly efficient, high ROI human capital enterprise, you pull a couple layers back off that onion and you start to see 11 core sports. And they include things like ice hockey, wrestling, lacrosse, water polo, swimming, cross-country running. And what some people sometimes look at is, but who plays those sports? Well, a lot of people do. And as we looked to grow the SEAL teams, we shifted a lot of our resources from supporting NFL events or going to NASCAR events to be a part of a patriotic celebration at a race, to taking those same supporting folks, those few SEALs, a precious resource, those few SEALs who are on shore duty, and we started having them go out to the National Wrestling Tournament, or we would have them go to, here in Coronado, California, which is a water polo factory. We bring 632 water polo players around the country together here for a competition. Well, we'd bring some SEALs out with a water polo and aquatics background and talk to some of these young folks. And a large number of them went on to become SEALs. In fact, the local high school here, I think, had a run of 28 water polo players who came in the Navy to be a SEAL, and none of whom had quit. I think we've had a couple who haven't since that time. That's a pretty amazing run for a pretty small town.
Yeah. So, oh, sorry. Go ahead. Did you want to finish that thought?
No, so the last thing that might relate to people is we really looked at character as a key element. We looked at mindset. We really had to institutionalize our mentoring. And then really, when you look at the far end of it, and it brings us back to where we are today, it's also military members who want to know their families are taken care of before they can decide to stay. Yeah. And that's where the SEAL Family Foundation piece makes me feel fulfilled in what I do currently. Yeah.
So I'm actually glad you said that last bit, because I'm looking at the chat here too, and I just want to let you know Tony Waters is watching. He wanted to let you know that, in fact, class 177 was the hardest class. Just wanted to give you an update.
Oh, is that, so they're now certified?
Yeah, that's what he. That's what he says. That's what his comment says.
That might have happened during the course of this, because I just went to Wikipedia before we did our interview, so it might have happened in the last few minutes. So it's 177. Yeah, I will make sure I share that word. Yeah. Thank you, Tony.
And thanks for watching, Tony. And you said you had talked about institutionalizing mentorship, and the Navy really adopted that policy too. I remember being in the Navy when it became mandatory that you had to have a mentor defined in your DIVO record, your division officer record. Every sailor had to have a mentor. When you joined and you get to the teams, you went to a SEAL team after, you finish your training. Did you have a mentor? Who brought you up as a JO in the SEAL teams?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, every JO in any part of the Navy, I believe, but certainly in the SEAL team is really raised and educated and gets their understanding of things by their senior enlisted. So in my case, it was a twin pin, a SEAL who had both his EOD crab and his SEAL trident. He's also a SEAL who had gone to Ranger school. He was an African-American SEAL before there were a lot of African-Americans. His first name was Les. I don't know if he'd be comfortable with me sharing his last name because he served in a number of roles and continues to today. But he was an amazing mentor. I also had another mentor, Master Chief Mike Faculty, in a platoon. And Mike got injured, left that platoon. But just really talented people who I hope it continues today. The notion when you walk into a platoon as an officer, you're sitting there looking around going, okay, this is a pretty hardcore, salty, accomplished crew around me. And I'm a college grad who just went through this, this BUDS thing. I'm going to lead these guys. But the culture is one where you serve as an assistant platoon commander. You might have some disassociated tours, and there's a method to the madness that does bring you along. But you have to trust your LPO and your chief, and you have to be self-aware and know when, humility pays off. But you also need to know when to lead. And I'm speaking more for a time when I was in platoons, and it has probably evolved a little bit these days, but back in the day, and what I personally experienced for me was I had two amazing chiefs, members of the Goat Locker, Senior Chief, first name Les, and then Mike, who really brought me along.
That's awesome. I think that's, a great answer as a sign of respect to the position that you're in as a JO, right? Because you can't not do anything because you're supposed to be in charge, and you're never going to earn respect if you just, if you're submissive or too introverted. But also you need to know that, this is something that I heard when working with the Army doing detainee ops deployment, was in many ways experience leads, and if somebody's done this time and time again, their knowledge is valid. They have a lot that they can share. And, hearing that, being willing to hear that and collect as much different points of view and perspectives as possible to then make better leadership decisions and develop yourself as a person is a great skill. Listening, following first is a great leadership quality, or knowing when to follow, knowing when to lead. Would you say that continued throughout your career as that kind of attitude that you brought as you made it? You retired as a captain in 2006. There's only 4 ranks above that that exist in the military. How did that attitude kind of serve you throughout your career?
I think it did. I think I also learned through observation. We had a commander at the time of 9/11. I was working at the headquarters, and we had Rear Admiral Eric Olson, who later went on to be a 4-star in Command SOCOM. But you would be in a staff meeting with a bunch of 05s, 06s, some Master Chiefs, and some senior civilian personnel who were subject matter experts. And there'd be this great debate going on over any one of a number of topics. And I don't say this is everyone, but in the case of Admiral Olson, all the conversation would be done. And then he has this ability. He's a very confident leader, but he's a quiet individual, if that makes sense. And so at the end of all this debate, he would sort of summarize, he'd take it all in and summarize in about 2 sentences or maybe 14 words, everything important that was discussed, along with giving us direction on what his intent was. And so you see a guy like that and you think there's a lot to learn there, and you try to emulate him. I used to fill in during that 10-year period where I was a reservist. I would go over downrange as a troop commander. So it'd be all active duty, 2 platoons of active duty SEALs. And I was the troop commander for these 2 platoons going to exercises in Africa. Did that a number of times. And I'd also fill in as the XO of SEAL Team 3. So through those experiences, I got to know a number of very great and successful officers, and Bill McRaven was one of them. And I kind of observed his style. I also observed later, after serving with him, when he was the CO of SEAL Team 3, and I would kind of fill in as his XO when his actual XOs would head off to a board or go off somewhere for some assignment. I would fill in and cover that role as executive officer. And when he was later Commodore Group 1, that whole notion of family, and I'm not trying to beat this theme to death, but the Commodore, who was developing amazing new technologies, developing the template for deploying the 06 Troop Commander downrange, who later led JSOC and was the leader of the Osama bin Laden takedown. When he was Commodore Group 1, we had family days or SEAL Pup days. He was out there running around wearing a pair of swim fins with a mask and, letting little kids throw water balloons at him, which spoke to his understanding of how important the family element was, spoke to his humility. But then the guy would go out later and crush it in terms of what he was developing for SEAL Team. Or if you read his book, Spec Ops, obviously an intellectual who really studies the art of commando warfare.
I have not read that, but that's going on the list.
It's a great book. It's a number. He wrote it actually while he was a graduate student at the Naval Postgrad School in Monterey, and his thesis became a book. He's written a number of other books, but this one talks about not just the United States small unit tactics, but the Italians, who are some of the most accomplished combat swimmers, and what the other forces throughout millennia and throughout the world or across the globe have done, and what we've learned from them.
I know one thing that people, you were talking about the increasing the force, and one thing that people might be interested to know about you, if you have a couple things about it you would like to share, is your work on two significant projects for the Navy. One, or it ended up being at least, one is the film Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen, and the other is Act of Valor. And can you talk a little bit about how those things came to be and what your role was with them?
Sure. So let's start with Navy SEALs first, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's legendary, one of the best Navy movies ever made.
Well, and it's one of those things too, where if we could just couch the whole film thing, when you talk to people like former Vice Admiral Joe McGuire, who saw the Richard Widmark film, The Frogman, and that was an impetus for his joining the military. You talk to Admiral McRaven, and he will tell you where he got the core or the kernel of the idea to become a SEAL was from watching John Wayne in the Green Berets. When you talk to Ed Byers, a SEAL Medal of Honor winner, who I've had the pleasure to meet a number of times, and he tells you, hey, I saw the movie Navy SEALs, and that's what put the idea in my mind. He grew up on a farm and was very distant from all those things. He wasn't in a small town that is a water polo factory that, you're 3 steps away from becoming a lifeguard and then becoming a bud student. He grew up pretty far away from all of that in small town America. And the movie Navy SEALs is what put him on a path to explore and then pursue that career field. And then he won while working with Naval Special Warfare Development Group. He was the recipient of the Medal of Honor for his work in a very, very celebrated rescue. So that said, that's kind of the nature of the film thing. Now, with Navy SEALs, I was getting out off active duty at that point in time. There was no GI Bill like there is today. So they had a thing called Veep, which sounds like a noise your laptop might make after you drop it. But in reality, it was a very poorly designed skinflint college program. So for Veep, you had to put in, basically you had to put in $2,700. And once you put in your $2,700, the military or DOD would add twice that amount, another $5,400, for a total of whatever that is, $8,100. So your entire college was paid for as long as it cost less than $8,100. I was going to UCLA and attending there to get my master's. And what I found was, in a 2-year program, you only get paid for those months where there's actually school. Additionally, it was your 2,700 that came out first. So my 2,700 disappeared probably at about month 18. And I think I got about, $600 of DOD money. So as I was getting ready to go to grad school, I heard they were making this movie called Navy SEALs. It was written by a former DevGru guy, Chuck Farr, and funny guy. And he'd spent time in the teams doing some notable things. And so already having been a stunt player on a small scale, not a lot of things, but I'd been a stunt man, had my SAG card, and a buddy from SEAL Team 5 who had just gotten out. And I reached out to the stunt coordinator. He said, yeah, well, we're interested. Come on up. But, the impression, the talk on the street was they were looking for guys who had all this combat experience, and almost no SEALs did back then. It was very, very rare. Probably more was seen at DevGru at that time than anywhere else, but not many people had seen much outside of Grenada and a few isolated incidents. So in meeting with them, I said, look, hey, if this makes sense for you, if you're looking for a Vietnam, SEAL who swam up river at night with a knife in his teeth and stuck behind enemy lines, that's not me. If you're looking for a guy who is a training officer at a SEAL team or in a platoon Tuesday, I'm your guy. And met with the stunt coordinator, an amazing guy, Bud Davis, who's still an icon. He and Gene LaBelle are some of the most notable stunt coordinators in Hollywood. He and the director, my buddy and I drove back, and back then there were no cell phones that had voice message capability. You had this thing about the size of a suitcase that had cassette tapes called an answering machine. And got back, my answering machine had a message, said, hey, could you guys move to Virginia Beach for filming in August, and then Spain for 2 months after that. And so I delayed grad school for a year because this was a chance to pay for grad school. And in so doing, the film had limited support from the military, meaning the military read the script. The public affairs folks, command folks had said, there's nothing here objectionable to my recollection, but we're not supporting it. We're not providing you boats and guys and all that stuff. So there were 7 or 8 SEALs, 4 from the East Coast, 3 or 4 from the West Coast, and we each doubled one of the actors. So the actor I doubled for all the SEAL stuff was Charlie Sheen. I didn't do the bridge jump. That was his personal stunt guy, an accomplished stuntman named Eddie Braun, and he was also the driver. But Eddie wasn't cut out for the SEAL stuff. And so swimming out of submarines, jumping out of helicopters, the underwater knife fight at the end of the movie, that was me as Charlie. And doubled one of the other actors who played a point man. So that film was made back in the day, based more on an East Coast team, and it held up fairly well. There's some things that I think all of us were probably a little frustrated by. The actors became kind of the script writers, things that we thought should have been more accurate weren't necessarily, but we were being, paid to do the kind of dangerous stuff. And the film was what the film was. And I think at the end of the day, it was pretty entertaining and gave a window on the SEALs. Some elements of it, I think there are 4 themes when we got, and I was in a producer role for the Navy, the lead producer for the Navy on Active Valor. And there's 4 themes that we really wanted to stress that were not stressed heavily in Navy SEALs. And one of those, quite honestly, was the notion of this SEAL platoon is having to gather all their own intelligence and their own supply clerks and their own everything. And the reality is the SEAL teams are a part of the Navy, and they're one of 4 warfare communities within the Navy, and the Navy's a part of DOD. And, when we later made Active Valor, we wanted to stress that Marines are partners, and the Air Force capability is a partner force. And the Navy works with EOD as an integral component, and all the enablers, yourself included, Max, who are the people who make missions happen. So we try to hit that as a theme. But just with Navy SEALs, it was a great experience. It paid for grad school, and it was, I think at the end of the day, it's a film that held up over time.
Yeah, I watched the whole thing yesterday. It's been a few years. It's been a few years since I've seen it, and I wanted to have it fresh in my mind. And it's interesting because watching it now, and talking to you about it. First of all, totally badass that you got to do that. Really amazing. I think that they're like, you know, a lot of hip firing going on. I think even the sniper, fire from every shot from the hip almost. And it was, so, you know, you could, when I watch a military movie, I try to forget that I was ever in the military and not nitpick because, you know, I know everyone's doing their best to balance the military history versus making this appealing for the masses. And this is coming off the heels of Commando and Predator and Arnold running around with a minigun all everywhere. And so anyway, what I was getting at was on the flip side of that, I'm watching this movie and I'm kind of just going through things like, okay, we've got, you know, SDV scenes, we've got halo jumps, we've got aircraft carrier, we've got intel gathering, recruiting sources, we've got a snatch and grab, we've got all like a ton, like it really and we got guys having fun on the golf course, you know, and drinking. We have the emotion, a funeral. It actually kind of was great, you know, like it really was. When I look at it, and I always knew it was an awesome movie, but I never really looked at it and said, well, does this hit the SEAL mission? How well does it hit like the SEAL mission? And it kind of really nails it in a lot of ways.
I think it was almost prescient, if I'm using that word correctly. I mean, it almost foretold the future in a lot of ways. I mean, there were some flaws, and you know, no one would drink water. Hey, guess what? I don't care how tough you are. You're drinking water on an extended mission. No one was ever seen eating food. Every round that was fired was from the hip, and it was into a hail of enemy bullets coming at the SEALs in the movie, and none of them got hit or rarely got hit. So there were some elements of it that we got probably too hung up on as tech advisors. It was funny in that I'd mentioned my dad earlier. So I saw the movie with my dad when it came out. I think I saw a premiere, and then I took him to see it. And I would say, you know, Dad, that doesn't make sense. You'd have to, there's no way you would go with that kind of sustained fire without changing magazines. You'd need many magazines to do that. And he'd go, uh-huh. And I'd say, another scene. And I'd tell him, you know, Dad, that wouldn't have happened because if you jump into dark water, like that bridge jump, when we go into water that we don't know what it is, you know, we go feet first and you kind of protect your body. And he, uh-huh. And we came out of the movie and he said, I am never watching another war movie with you. So I learned a little bit from that. But there were some good elements to it. You mentioned the golf scene. That was very genuine. That was, when you work on a film like that, and today the film industry has evolved. I have not been involved with it for a while, but you know, you work 6 days a week. You're on a weekly check as a stunt player, as an actor, and all those guys would work their contracts however they worked them. But you work hard. And so we had one day off, and the guy said, "Let's go golfing." And that was very organic. We all went golfing. There were some beers involved, and Bill Paxton, you know, rest in peace, who played the sniper. Bill said, "Hey," and he was at that point, he'd never directed anything, and this was his opportunity. He pitched to the film's director the notion of a second unit to do the scene that you saw at the golf course, and it basically recreated what we'd done on our day off on a Sunday.
Oh, that's awesome.
I don't think we damaged the course quite the way they did in the scene that was filmed. We PT'd with the actors. We showed up the first day, and it was kind of funny because they were telling us as we were getting ready, you got 3 months, just so you know, these actors were hand selected. These people have had personal trainers, some of the best diving coaches in the world working with them, you know, 2-3 times a week. The production company's been paying for it. Stand by. We were kind of all old guys, right? The youngest guy was probably 29 and most of us were 32, 30, 33. So first day we get out there, there's a 2-week training segment, kind of like how Dale Dye will take people for Platoon or Saving Private Ryan and run kind of a boot camp and sort of a military appreciation thing. We did something like that, and it included a PT circle, a physical training circle, kind of like what you do at a SEAL team. And first day, all the actors are there, and we're like, man, these kids are going to be tough as anything. And a couple of them were. Dennis Haysbert, tough as nails. Rick Rosovich, tough as nails. A lot of these guys had a lot of heart and had trained and were getting after it. Haysbert, who's the Allstate insurance guy, and he
Oh yeah.
was in the unit, a number of other shows.
Mm-hmm.
He played the chief in the movie,
Yeah.
which to me, I actually got him together with Les, who is my platoon chief, to talk about the concept of being an African American in a largely, a pretty much coastal, kind of people from Washington, Oregon, California, and then a few places in the Midwest, and then kind of Connecticut, New Jersey, and Florida, Texas thing. What's it like to be a Black SEAL leader? And so there was some good mentoring that went on there between Dennis Haysbert and my first platoon chief, Les. So as we're PT, and that's day one, we got all these guys, and some were hanging, but we soon realized, we kind of got this down. The next day, it went from 7 actors to about 5 actors, but all 8 of us were there. The third day, it was I think it was either Cyril O'Reilly or Dennis Haysbert who showed up, and it was just us. So we're like, okay, we see how that's gonna go. So it's pretty funny, but they had good heart. They really wanted to learn what we were all about. And a couple of these guys, I mean, later, Haysbert, Rick Rosovich in particular. Rick Rosovich, just a beast. He played community college football, but he was pretty tough dude. So, and all of them wanted to learn more about, the community to accurately, as best we could, gain information to portray the SEAL teams well. They didn't always, sometimes they lost out when we'd say, hey man, put weight in your pack. Viewers know. We all watch military movies. We can tell when it's a pillow or a chunk of foam.
Yeah.
Put weight in your pack. We lost those battles, but others we won.
That's awesome. It's great. It's actually, that is a really good piece of history there about the chief in the film and your senior chief Les. It's interesting to note that level of thoughtfulness was put into that. I think people will really enjoy knowing that. That's really cool. That you were considering those types of things back then. A lot of people wouldn't really think about that period of time, because the movie came out in 1990, I think, theatrical release, and consider that people were actually, having those conversations back then, thinking about those kinds of things, putting that kind of consideration into the representation in the film. So that's awesome. And then while you were working on the Naval Special Warfare, working on this manpower issue, how did Act of Valor come to be? Which I think is another awesome movie.
Yeah. Well, there were a couple things about Act of Valor. We, when we realized how much of a shortfall we had in SEAL manning at the height of the global war on terror, or what later was referred to as just the war on terror, but largely Iraq, Afghanistan, the Philippines, and then also maintaining a presence with our partner forces throughout Asia and Latin America and Africa. There was a lot of work, and we needed people desperately. And so the challenge was so great, particularly after year one of our 5-year plan. We were up one guy, 499 to get in 4 years. We said, okay, we've done this study. We had to file for what's called a UFR, an unfunded request.
Yep.
To do a really in-depth, thorough marketing research. Actually, it was the Gallup folks who we hired to help us do that. We identified those traits, and then we also thought, okay, what can we do that let's pull every lever we can. And so we don't know really which ones made the ultimate difference. All we know is that we did about 6 things. One of which was we developed a mentor network, because we found that if someone knew a SEAL, didn't need to be a brother or a dad or a next door neighbor, but if you knew a SEAL, the odds of you completing training were about 60% higher. So we developed a mentor network of former SEALs and SWCS across the country, 26 different recruiting districts in the Navy. There were 26 individuals serving in those. We also created a financial incentive for the completion of Hell Week. Pretty much universally, as we look back, that $40,000 or $48,000 probably had very little impact. 18-year-olds, 22-year-olds are driven by mission accomplishment. They're not driven by, man, I'd buy a Lexus or a Raptor if I had $48,000 in my pocket. So we did that, though, financial incentive. We also created a SEAL-specific company within boot camp up at Great Lakes in Illinois. That probably had some impact. We created a BUDS prep. So after you finish boot camp, but before you came to basic underwater demolition SEAL training, you'd have to go through this kind of training course. Because you basically, and as you know, Max, from your experience, the opportunity to work out in Navy boot camp and the food, while high quality, is probably not in volume sufficient to sustain a guy who's burning 4,500 calories a day training, right?
Yeah.
So BUDS prep kind of got around that. And we did some other things. So
can I just really, I don't want to interrupt you, but I know for people listening might want to know this when you talk about the food in Navy boot camp. I have to add too, for what it's worth, and a startling amount of access to like cake, donuts, muffins, things that are downright not good for you. When you hit the chow line at Navy boot camp, you can grab those things too. There's no incentive or to choose or not to choose those items, so it still remains up to the individual. They could make it what what it is, and then you eat at very specific times. Not like, hey, I just finished a workout, I could really use these nutrients right now. That's not really an option either.
No, that's a good point. I mean, I think the quality of food at boot camp, you lived it. I didn't. I visited it. So I have a feeling that when I would come through with an admiral and a couple master chiefs and another captain, the food quality may or may not have been representative that day as to every meal. Yeah. But there was, there was the responsibility of personal selection in what you ate. And you're right. If a kid gravitated towards, some food subjects or objects than others, you could, it's not optimal. No trained, no athlete, triathlete's going to seek those exact food items you mentioned. Yeah. But overall, the quality, I guess, is decent, but the training and the opportunity to improve it through BUDS prep was there. So we had never finished, never had a full BUDS class going back to World War II, Korea, Vietnam, ever. The first full class. In fact, when we were at our low point in 2006, 2005, 2006, they actually wanted to remove the notion of real cold water immersion from training because it was thought that perhaps that's reducing our numbers. And so no class started between, say, October and March to move away from those coldest times a year for a Hell Week to take place. And they dropped to just 4 classes a year. So through the efforts that we described and through a marketing campaign that included things like reaching out to the Ironman organizers and talking to the race director there, who we have a relationship with her and with the NBC folks. We had SEALs attend the Ironman, parachute into the water at the start. And then later, in fact, one of our admirals, Keith Davids, along with another SEAL, David Goggins, some of your folks may know him. They parachuted. I was the third guy wearing the helmet camera, but they parachuted, hit the water, and then did the Ironman. And in classic SEAL tradition, they crossed the finish line high-fiving in a pretty competitive time. So, those kind of opportunities were things that we used to educate people about the opportunity to become a SEAL. And as it went on, we realized started doing a series called Life After the SEAL Teams. And we talked to people like, a number of folks from all kinds of different walks. Michael Crook, who was an enlisted SEAL, who later went on to be the president of companies ranging from Pearl Izumi cycle gear to Kelty backpacking equipment to Patagonia. Wow. Michael then earned his PhD. He's now a professor up in Oregon. He'd been a professor at Pepperdine. We interviewed Michael. What did you learn in the SEAL teams that made you so successful today? He's a venture capital partner with one of the original founders of AOL. And he would describe that. So we recognized you had to get the word out there. We wanted to make it credible. We developed an app so that people could take the SEAL screening test. We developed the SEAL screening test as its own athletic event and had the Navy SEAL Challenge that traveled across the country. And so people could take it in kind of a sports festival manner and see where they stack up. So it was partly education. Active Valor was born out of the notion of let's look towards granting access to a film production company that we would allow the opportunity to compete for that project that would be handled by the Navy's public affairs arena. People would submit to the PAO folks a panel who would address and evaluate each of those proposals. The proposal that won was Act of Valor, which was directed by Scott Waugh. Scott Waugh had been a stuntman, past president of Stunts Unlimited. His father had actually played Spider-Man, was a stunt player for Spider-Man. His brother's a noted director as well. So Scott Waugh, Mouse McCoy, another stunt player, a motorcycle guy, came in, and that was their first, their directorial debut. And I worked closely with them. We kind of partnered. We, the Navy, granted access on a not to interfere basis. They had to collect their funding to make the film. So it's a really unique partnership. It was done legally, legitimately. The SEALs were not paid. Everyone there, it was an ancillary duty to what their regular job was. And through the course of what was about a year, I provided them with about 35 SEALs who were on shore duty, who said they'd be willing to, share their insight to better develop the script. And in the course of interviewing those 35 guys who, were not going through, didn't have DUIs or any kind of impending legal action or anything like that, through those 35 interviews, they said, "Hey, here are the 9 that we really think are the core of this that we'd like to build this film around." And that was awesome. They chose. We wanted to we had veto power, but we wanted their artistic insight. We didn't want to direct the film by proxy. It was theirs to build. We wrote on the roof of my house, along with one of the screenwriters from 300, a good friend of mine who was the SEAL, Tom Brown, myself, Scott Waugh, Mouse McCoy, really kind of sketched out the themes for what the film was. And then they went ahead, Kurt Johnstad went ahead and built that into an actual script. And those 4 themes that we really mandated, you tell us the story how you want, but the story needs to include, it's a team of teams, right? We talked earlier about Navy SEALs, how every component from intel gathering to everything else was the SEALs doing it for themselves. Well, that's not accurate. So let's make it accurate. Let's fly on Air Force birds with Navy helicopters supporting, with Marines in support, and EOD and Air Force combat controllers. The second theme was we wanted to honor the fallen. We wanted to honor our brothers. We wanted this to be something that was accurate. And so 4 or 5 of the major themes of the movie were ones that I chose. I said, this is important. You can say Duncan doesn't, they always call me captain, but the point is, hey, say Duncan, this doesn't fit with what we're trying to do, but these are important stories that are accurate. I wanted everything to be off the battlefield. We didn't want it to be, and they really drove this, didn't want it to be in the desert or in Afghanistan, right? Because that had really proven to be sort of box office poison at that time. A lot of films about those battles really didn't do well, and these guys were in business, but they're also very honorable. They wanted to tell our story right. Another theme was diversity. And again, not diversity of forces. We talked about that, the team of teams concept, but this diversity is, and as you saw, probably the most challenging underwater work in any branch of the military that you can do. And you referenced it earlier, is locking out of a submarine for a 7-8 hour, 10-hour time underwater, breathing either boat air or off a dragger device. And locking out and getting into a sealed delivery vehicle, a mini submarine, being wet and submerged that entire time. A lot of people think you got to be a Laguna Beach water polo player to have that kind of competency, or a Jersey Shore lifeguard. But the reality is we had a Hispanic SEAL who grew up in East LA, and an African-American SEAL from the East Coast who actually was a runway model. AJ was a runway model before joining the SEAL teams as like a 31-year-old. Just an aberrant human being in terms of his physicality. So those 2 were the 2 folks that were the SDV pilot and navigator for that scene. I had the pleasure of being underwater. I was one of 2 primary underwater videographers for the film throughout all the submarine scenes and diving scenes. And I always will appreciate Senior Chief Andy McCaskill, who kind of mentored me on becoming a better cameraman, particularly into the underwater side. And I had fun shooting the aerials and that kind of thing. So we wanted to make that theme of diversity important. And then the fourth is evidenced very early on in the film and then later in the film, which is family, right? So you see the beach scene, the platoon gets together. That was the hardest part of the film to get approval for, because it was on a beach on Navy property. And, you know, all the live fire stuff that you saw, which was live fire stuff, that was a whole lot easier because we were using ranges. But to do a bonfire on a beach had a lot of layers to it. But we got everything approved and did it the right way. But that was about family. And that was about recognizing, you know, their young kids are important to them. Family was there when there was a funeral in the film. And families talked about when they have that scene in the coffee shop about, hey, my wife's pregnant. You know, what do you think, Chief? So those are the four themes. We also wanted to correct things from Navy SEALs. You know, let's not have a sniper shoot through stone walls from an ancient Roman fort, because there's no 50 cal round that does that. You don't switch to thermal and see, you know, so let's keep it real. So we hopefully were successful at that.
Yeah, it was awesome. I think you guys nailed it. The senior chief, when he's doing the interview on the yacht, is one of the best scenes. His acting was incredible. And you told me something interesting about that. Were you saying that was, how much of that was scripted versus improvised?
It's pretty funny. So that was Derek Van Orden, who is actually running for Congress. And one thing I want to say about all these guys who are in the film too, this wasn't the SEAL to Hollywood program. These were guys who we approached. The person, the chief, for example, he's like, hey, I'm all about my mission training young frogmen. And the reason we approached the chief was that was his makeup. That was genuine. And what I said to him in private was, look, Chief, this is about you when you're a master chief, which, by the way, he is today. This is about you really helping craft, identifying the character and building a tool that brings the right people in to serve in the SEAL team later on. And now he is a master chief running training, and he's had a hand in really bringing in what we believe are the right folks through this film. When the film was shown, before it was released, we did a screening at the White House at the invitation of the president. And we went back there, and that same chief, and I'm not mentioning his last name because he's on active duty, but he had just returned from Afghanistan, where he was out in a PRT, a small village campaign, working with Afghans and SEALs to defend an area of the Afghan countryside. And when he returned home, I called him up and said, hey, Chief, we're going to the White House. We'd love to have you there. And true to form, he said, hey, sir, I appreciate that, in that Staten Island accent. But I got to tell you, this deployment turned into 9 months, and not all of it was gravy. We lost some of our partner force guys. And if it's all the same to you, I'll skip the White House. My kids and I are going to have a picnic this weekend, and we're going to go to the beach. And I'm like, you are the guy you portrayed in the movie. And he truly is. So I don't think I answered your question there, because you'd asked me something and I think I got a little off track, but I wanted to raise that point about the characters, the SEALs who play those characters.
No, I think, you answered it in a way, the question about improvised versus on screen and, or on script, Yeah. And
yeah, Derek Van Orden, who's running for Congress, that whole interrogation scene was unscripted. And the director, Scott Waugh, was not comfortable with that until they started chatting a bit. And he goes, all right, okay, well, we can shoot it a couple ways. Let's go your way. So the gentleman who portrayed the weapons, the arms dealer, the Russian, was actually put, without his knowledge, in the engine room, and which is incredibly hot on a yacht like that. And I think someone might have actually visited the thermostat to make sure it remained hot. And he was down there handcuffed for a long, long time, like a long, long time. And then he was brought up, put in the salon of that yacht, sat across from Derek Van Orden and Senior, basically started grilling him. And, he's a good actor, and he kind of went through all the right things. Alex Medved, I think was his name. And then Vano, as we would call him, started pulling out things that he learned about the actor's personal life. And not all of which are included in the film, but every one of which rattled him to the core. And so he was hot, tired, confused, was really uncomfortable going into this without a script. And man, I think it turned into one of the strongest scenes in the film.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And, you know, you were talking about family, and obviously there's a big part of this that's to do with the SEAL Family Foundation and supporting that. And you're talking about family, and, you know, the movie actually ends. I think it's the last part of the movie is the letter from father to son, right? Isn't that the
Yeah.
last thing we see is, you know, generation to generation, which is maybe the most, you know, what we all hope to leave behind is another generation of people who are doing a little bit better than us, right? Every time. And that's the goal. And I think that really came across, as far as I'm concerned. I think it was awesome. And I can tell, but maybe you can elaborate that a lot of the action sequences, particularly where the SEALs were wounded, are all inspired by actual real life stories off the battlefield. The way that they were hurt, killed, you know, one SEAL in the beginning is shot in the eye. Is it true that those are all basically inspired by true events?
They absolutely were. And just one thing back to the point you raised about family, um, the SEAL playing the lieutenant kind of fits a lot of our profile things. He was an All-American lacrosse player in college. So, I mean, it kind of validates that point about where you seek talent. But additionally, he himself and his own family at the time of filming was going through the process of a first child. And so all that emotion was pretty genuine. And I think he carried it off wonderfully because it was real for him. You know, and I'm sorry, the other point you asked me about, could you run that by me one more time? We were just
all the injuries and the way that people were wounded in the film.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure everything was 100% accurate. So there's a gentleman who today is a law enforcement officer in the Chicago area, but just big, tough kid. And I don't want to share more than I should. It's appropriate in this forum, but I'll tell you, your interview subject, Ben, was the guy who pulled him off the roof when a rifle round went through his eye and out the back of his head. And to talk to this young man, I'll believe his first name is Mark. The bullet went in Mark's eye, out the back, and as he says, left an exit wound the size of a Gatorade cap. Very specific, but man, that's easy to imagine the size of that hole. He walked to the helicopter. I was working at the Bud's compound, and he had gone through a pretty serious recovery phase. But what movies don't portray or is not often talked about is wounds are more serious than what a 1960s Western would make you think.
Yeah.
Yep. You've seen this. You've got teammates, Max, who you've seen injured, and it's pretty nasty business treating and recovering. And it's why, honestly, there ought to be more movies honoring the medical community, because the things they do, from the medevac folks, some of whom are incredibly valorous, and these are largely Army medevac crews that will fly in. You know, in case of our camp in Afghanistan got hit, there's a medevac crew that we went out of our way to thank. They pulled two of our SEAL buddies off, and some close friends were Green Berets, one of whom didn't make it, First Sergeant Drew McKenna. But you know, those folks are a whole part of it. You know, the notion of the stories off the battlefield. Mark, when he was shot, walked to the medevac helicopter, recovered, and then he wanted to get back in the fight. And his whole battle was, I want to be a SEAL again. And they had him instructing at the Bud's compound while they went through further medical treatment. He had a glass eye with a huge trident in it. And this kid went from, I don't think he was ever weak in his life, but he really focused on recovering physically. And so you can imagine being a young Bud student, and you're there for your knife inspection before a 2-mile swim. And this buffed out dude who literally had a huge wrestling background, but he looks like a college linebacker, is staring you down, and you notice, oh my God, there's a gold trident in one eye. That was Mark, and just an amazing guy and a humble guy. And years later, I went to visit boot camp, and in one of the stairways, and I think they're referred to as ships, right? Those buildings.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There's a picture of a SEAL coming out of the water with a gold trident in his eye. So that story was off the battlefield. And that's portrayed by Mikey. Mike is the person who's wounded. The bullet comes through his eye. But just about every other story was straight off the battlefield, and we wanted to include those in the film.
And so it's awesome. And so the question I have, and it might be, burning a hole in everyone's mind right now, is you do all these things, including Act of Valor, to accomplish this goal of writing, basically, correcting the manpower in the teams. And how did it go?
So great question. And thank you for following up on that, because we never filled a class, but all these different engines that we combined, we don't know which one or two or three of the 6 or 7 made the difference. But in 2007, we had our first full class ever in our history. And at that point in time, we went from 4 classes a year back to 5, to eventually, for the first time ever, 6 classes a year, each class full. And today, there's about 210 folks who compete to class up. And classes, I think, run about 160 students now. And they get whittled down. The standard's the same. But so we are in a position, and have been for about the past decade plus, where we have all the SEAL candidates that we need. And to the point, in fact, where I think the community, and I can't speak for the community because I'm not on active duty, but I think with wars in Afghanistan and Iraq lessening, they've taken the foot off the gas pedal a little bit. And so the demand signal for new SEALs has lessened, and training remains just as tough as ever. But yes, we did solve that manning shortfall. And a lot of those folks who came in 2006, 2007, 2008 were the SEALs who fought and earned the core of those stories that today are shared among trainees, the same way the valorous stories of SEALs and their exploits in Vietnam were shared with me when I was a trainee.
Yeah, amazing. You were there, your career spans a long period of time, including a break in service where I can't believe we're talking to you. I can't believe that you're the guy responsible for so many great things out of the SEAL community, the Naval Special Warfare community. You have been a part of such iconic moments, frankly, and a big part of that, not to in any way suggest that these movies are the biggest part, but really it's that the Naval Special Warfare community needed people, and people is the number one resource that the military has. And you were there at the time when the Navy Special Warfare community, the most elite in the world, needed people the most, and were put in charge of figuring out how to make that happen at the peak of the violence in Iraq and Afghanistan, where, we're fighting wars on, and really with a continuing war in Africa and a developing war in PACOM at the time, a time where people were spread so thin, and figuring out ways to recruit people to meet the mission. And then you go and you do it, and it's incredible, and congratulations. But honestly, would you have really wanted it any other way?
Well, I'll tell you, I feel really honored to have been in a role that I could make a difference, but it was more than just me. I mean, right now, I think he's one of the most senior guys in Airbnb in North America. Someone named Darren Evenson, who's a former SEAL team CO, probably one of the smartest folks I've ever met. And he was a partner in this effort because he was at that time the officer community manager. So he really knew what all the levers were, and had that close tie to the Navy personnel folks. Another person, Captain Bart Randall, who's still on active duty, but he was the enlisted community manager at that time. And then soon after, he was the commanding officer at SEAL Team 5. And so I partnered with him, and so there was a force there. And then people like Rear Admiral Brian Losey, Rear Admiral Joe McGuire, that was their rank at the time. They're all the commanders. They all made a huge difference. Admiral Ed Winter, all who kind of endorsed and said, hey, especially Admiral McGuire, we are under duress. We need to find these people, and let's figure out the who and the how. And, they trusted me to move forward. I trusted, Diana Birch, who's the race director in Hawaii, to treat us well. a buddy who was a surface warfare officer, who was commander of a cruiser, to support that effort on a greater Navy front as well as SEAL team front. He's now a Vice Admiral, Ron Boxall. We had lots of partners across the board who helped us. So I feel good about it. In terms of what some SEALs have done, I've done 5 combat deployments, but there are those who followed me and came before me that have 12 combat deployments and are wearing silver stars and, all kinds of decorations for Valor. So I would do, what I really took pride in, and this is what I would tell a young person: identify what you're good at. If you want someone to lead the recovery mission for a international healthcare worker trapped in Somalia, you probably don't want Duncan Smith to be that guy. You probably want more like a Bart Randall. Or if it's an underwater side, you want the former, you want the CO of the SDV team, which is someone like Darren Evenson. But I would go and I would work a variety of missions. My last job was chief of staff for all special operations in Afghanistan. I spent 2015 to 2016 in Afghanistan. And I valued that role. And I spent a lot of time all over the country. And I think I was making a difference. But there are a lot of SEALs with a ton of experience that, I don't hold a candle to there. But where I do feel I made a difference is, I'm a guy with an MBA, mentored by this young woman named Melinda French when I did my business school internship at Microsoft. Melinda French was kind of like Admiral Eric Olson. She listens, she hears everything from these brand managers, and then she says it in like 7 words, and you now have a marketing plan. And she later went on to become Melinda Gates. But I was a 33-year-old post-platoon commander learning leadership lessons from this 26-year-old MBA with a computer science degree. So I feel, I learned stuff when I was an RA, and then I ran a low-income housing unit, a HUD Section 8 building before I finished college. And I learned stuff from community members that made me a better person in my role of trying to bring diverse candidates who met the standard into the SEAL teams. And so I think we're all kind of the sum of our own experiences. And I would tell a young person, aspire to be your best, recognize where you have certain skills, and try to highlight those skills, and polish those skills, but try to be good at everything, but recognize, what your strength is. So long-winded answer to a simple question. Yeah, I'm really pleased that I could make that difference at the right time.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Be good at everything and be the best at what you're the best at. I love that. We've been going here for almost 2 hours now. You and I have been on this conversation. Wow. I had just looked at the clock and realized how long we've been going. I want to give you the opportunity, and I don't know if you want to pivot back to the SEAL Family Foundation. I do have this link that I was given for the video. If you wanted me to show this 30-second video to people who are on this call, it's the slideshow that was forwarded to me from the Family Foundation. If you want, I can show that to the audience here.
Would you please, if you could share the screen?
Yep. So
and then while that's going on, I'll just kind of highlight a little bit of what you see. You're not seeing names, you're not seeing faces. So you have to recognize this film is representative of what we do, but we are very careful when we go to a graduation or an event with family. We might sharply focus on the food or what we're providing, but the people are often blurred. So,
all right. So
let me know.
You'll hear it, and then people at home will be able to see this right now. I'm going to start playing it. So it's playing right now. I don't know if there's an audio component to this, but it is. We're seeing the photos of everyone at the event here, at the various events.
So what I would tell people too, if they choose to make a difference in bringing families together to allow SEALs and special warfare combatant craft crewmen to continue to support the nation and our national defense, I'd ask people to consider the SEAL Family Foundation as a vehicle to support that effort. We're at sealfamilyfoundation.org. That's our website, all one word, sealfamilyfoundation.org. And you're going to see on your screen here that you can also text the word SEAL to, I believe it's 24365. Is that
right?
Correct?
That's right. Yep. 24365. Text USA to 24-365 to assist us in supporting the evacuation of American citizens and those Afghanis that have helped the U.S. these past 20 years, as well as other, I'm sure you'll get other information. That's if you text USA, but the number here is 24365.
We also have an event in Philadelphia on April 28th if people would like to attend that. We're going to have SEALs present, but it's a gala event where we're going to talk about the work we do. We'll have some Gold Star spouses speaking, as well as some SEAL members. And actually in Denver on April 6th, we've got a private event, a reception that if people are interested, they can go to sealfamilyfoundation.org and request more information on that.
Awesome. I think we do have some listeners out in Philadelphia who maybe will want to check that out. So I want to give you the opportunity here to say anything that that you'd like to the audience or to me directly, or however, whatever is on your mind. If there's something that we didn't get to or something that you want to share, floor is yours.
Well, I'll tell you, Max, what you're doing is amazing. And there's so much information out there, some of which is valid, some of which isn't. And, your podcast, I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it. I think the manner in which you share information and the manner in which you conduct interviews, that you're something I am now subscribed to and will continue to be subscribed to. So it's an honor to be a part of it. I also think too, recognizing that, for young people, those men and women, who are considering what they want to do with their life. If you're looking for a purpose, you're looking for a mission. I think it's pretty popular right now to look past the military, to look past some sort of conventional routes, but get to know some of the men and women who served in uniform and learn from them, because everything from, if you're looking to go to med school, there are, Navy, Army, Air Force scholarships for that thing, that kind of training. There is a whole wealth of opportunity in the military. Is it for everyone? No, but it is a great start to head out and move on to other things. For years, the head of astronaut training at NASA, Chris Cassidy, a guy I shared a tent with in Afghanistan, a former SEAL who went on to lead all of the space training for all astronauts in NASA. We already mentioned Michael Crook, who led a number of organizations, and people like Darren Evenson who've gone on to do great things in their lives. And your listeners will too, particularly the young people as they try to figure out their way. So appreciate the opportunity to share with them. I would tell people, trust your intuition as you think about what you want to do in life. For those people who are on the far end of their career and they're looking to hire young, talented people, please consider veterans as folks to hire. But most importantly, make sure that character is a component in your search for talent within your organization. Thank you so much, Max, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I'm truly humbled by what you said, and the pleasure and honor is all mine to hear a little bit about your really, truly fascinating life. And thank you for sharing all of your accomplishments and a little bit about your career with us today. I know people in the audience really enjoyed it. And if you don't mind, stay on the line, and I am going to close out the episode, and I'll be back with you in a moment, Duncan.
Sounds good. Thanks.
So guys, that is, what an incredible story. Thank you, Duncan Smith, for joining us today. Thank you guys for watching that episode. If you can, please, the most important thing you could do for me today is go check out sealfamilyfoundation.org and see how you can get involved. If that's a program that you want to support, they're out there taking care of tons of people. Thankfully, I never had to turn to the SEAL Family Foundation for anything when I was serving in Naval Special Warfare, but just the fact that, they're out there and knowing that they have your back when you're going back-to-back deployments, 300 days a year, traveling, stuff like that. It's really amazing. And the fact that he would choose to continue to serve after such a long career in the teams is awesome. I hope you guys learned something cool today, and make sure you guys stick around for many more exciting and interesting interviews to come in the future. It's going to be a great road ahead of us here on the Scuttlebutt Show. Thank you for joining me today. With all that being said, I look forward to talking to you guys very soon. And for now, that's the Scuttlebutt.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.